I feel like now the CHL in general is going to be a bit more watched because a lot of cases people are also like, if you're a college hockey fan, you're like, oh, which one of these guys are we going to get in a couple of
It's a
years?
good point.
It's a really interesting landscape that not enough people really know what's going to happen there. Like we know Malcolm Spence obviously going into to college. There's a
Crazy.
bunch of other high end prospects that they haven't announced yet that are also going to be going the same way, and it's going to be really fun. So. In case of that, like there's some opportunities to go out there and shine. I guess the one thing that you gotta always be worried about is if all the top prospects are leaving, does it start to devalue the
Yeah.
OHL? And that's what you don't want. You don't want this to be a situation where the BCHL is obviously a bit of a different situation, but the big thing about them was they were attracting all the best college bound guys.
Yeah.
Now there's no reason to go play there, and the league took a massive hit this year. So I think
Like the
you don't want
USHL.
that to happen at this point. You want to make sure you're keeping these guys like it's harder. It might be harder to build for the long term future going forward. Where teams this year at the OHL draft, there was a lot of question marks. Like, are we getting these guys just for 2 years, or are we getting them for the full 4 years? Or like, obviously, there's the question about the guys who do 2 years and go straight to the NHL. But what about the guys who 2 years go to college? That's where things get really interesting here. So I think just from a drafting perspective, like, our team's going to start drafting safer picks as opposed to the high end picks, just because you might have a better chance of holding on to those guys longer. Like,
Yeah.
teams don't want to have those guys for just 2 years. They want to have those guys for longer, especially not the early part of their 2 years where they're not playing their best. So it's going to be very interesting. But as long as they can keep the core together, like you look at and you look at Rubric, you look at Zada, like those are good guys who you can still build around and make a very competitive team. So I think there's going to be a lot of eyes there, and I'm very interested to see where this whole thing kind of shakes out in the next couple of years, because I don't think anyone knows. I know for a fact like OHL GMs have no idea how this is going to go.
Yeah.
Completely new to navigate for sure. The window goes from 4 years, basically. You mentioned it too. I think you're going to see a lot of super teams, or that situation where where you're going all in is not three cracks at it, it's one or maybe two.
Yeah, it's interesting because it could be a lot of situations where teams don't know where those players are going to play up until after the draft, because those NHL teams are going to start making the decisions for you. And that's why it's interesting seeing someone like Malcolm Spence commit when he did. It's like, would you not want to wait to see what the NHL team, maybe they'd rather have you in the OHL? We'll see. So it'll be interesting, but like we expect a lot of announcements within the days after the draft is over, and I think that's going to make things wild.
Yeah, like you just don't want it to turn into a U18 league for the best top quality players, right? You want to see them last longer in the OHL. We know that the second round this year had more Americans than ever in the OHL draft, so it was interesting to see. And like you said, the landscape is changing, but you hope that the OHL retains those players. And like Cam mentioned, like as far as keeping those cores together, you might have to go for it a year earlier than you usually would. So I think there's a lot changing in that sense. Steven, I have a quick question just in general about the draft that somebody wanted me to ask you, as far as what you think the value is of, picks between, 7 to 15. Like, what is a first round pick worth now as far as trade value? Because we know, if it's a deeper draft or if it's a weaker draft, that could change things. But, we don't really see the Corey Schneider or Bo Horvat for Corey Schneider type deals where he was basically traded for a top 10 pick there. Like, where do you see the value of picks now? Because it's different than maybe in some other sports. Where do you think it's going? Is it better, more, lesser than maybe it was in the past?
That's a great question. I know, like, every year you see people on Twitter like theorizing that their team might trade down like 2 or 3 picks to get some. Like, that doesn't happen. And I don't see why an NHL team would really want to do that unless the offer is so compelling, or the team that's willing to give up a lot of assets are willing to go in and
you're passing on Z or William.
well, look, hey, we know how much fun that you look at that D group last year, and Lev Shunov, I think, gets nowhere as much attention as he probably should for how good of a defenseman he is. But then William goes and dominates college. Sam Dickens goes and dominates the OHL. Like, it's a very interesting draft class. This year, like, yeah, it's not a super strong draft, but I still think like it really depends on the team. Like, I know it's kind of feels like a cop-out answer, but it depends on the team, because certain teams might not be willing to wait an extra year to go grab a guy. Like, they might be like, we want to start doing this now. And I'd rather have a player than have a pick. I'd rather have that 100%. that known quantity at this point than like, maybe we'll see what happens. Like, you saw what happened at the draft lottery. The Islanders had no intent, like they had basically no shot at picking first overall. And they're picking first overall. Now they got to change first off, they had to hire a GM, but they had to change their entire outlook of how they were going to handle the draft. So I'd rather draft in the present than trying to trade and do something like that. So it really is team dependent. But like I'm looking at the bottom end of this top 10. Like you could get Victor Eklund, who I think is going to be better than his brother. And I know Cam, you like
no,
but they're
I think
players.
So too. I think that there could be, yeah.
They're totally different players. And fun fact, they actually like play like NHL with each other like all the time.
Really?
Yeah, like even though their time zones are very different in San Jose and Sweden.
That is a very different time zone.
Yeah, they still play a lot of NHL together. Yeah, like so like I'm trying to think of what other teams like
Buffalo at 9.
You're still gonna get some good value. Like Roger McQueen could fall out of the top 10.
Yeah.
And this is one of the most interesting forwards we've seen in a long time because he's this like kind of like Caden Lidstrom last year where he's got so much skill, but he barely played this year due to back injuries. And we saw what that just did to Caden Lidstrom, where he barely played any games this season. So I think it really kind of depends on where that team is. But right now, like I would rather have pick a player now than trade it to maybe get a pick next year, because as good as that draft could be, your situation could change. And that's why you never draft for your immediate needs either. You draft best player available in the first round, because your immediate need could change 3 days later in free agency. So you might as well get who you think is going to be the best player down the line. Because the worst case, like Montreal drafted a lot of defensemen in a short span. They were able to...
Ryan, but yeah, that was always their issue. They did it in the wrong year.
They kept drafting defensemen. They didn't get any superstar defensemen, but they were able to go out and upgrade their current roster and getting Alex Carrier, for example, by trading one of the young defensemen they had in the system. And they still have more. Like Logan Mailloux, I have to assume he's on the trade market at this point because they've got too many young guys, and he's going to be in his third year in the AHL. Like at some point, he's got to make that step forward. So again, it really depends, but I would rather have a pick now and take that asset and see what you can do with it. And you don't see prospects traded immediately way after, but you look at who was the team that drafted? Was it Vegas? Vegas drafted David Edstrom.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was
he's on his third different team.
Yeah, third team already, and I still think he's an outstanding prospect. But there's like he's a key piece of every trade he's part of.
Yep.
And Vegas easily could have traded that first round pick to get something else at the deadline, but they got him, and they've turned that into assets that they use now.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have that than trade the pick.
Last question for me. What is the percentage that Schaefer falls to 2 for the Sharks? Which is the ultimate dream scenario.
I don't think the Islanders should pass on him.
I know.
But
they need to score, though.
It's never been more wide open.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like in a perfect world, if Chicago got first overall, I think Schaefer.
They would have. Same. That's what I said too. I was like, man, let me Chicago win the draft lottery. They take themselves out of the running for McKenna too. It was a whole thing. I was just like, oh, let it be, and it didn't work. The
Islanders are the Islanders are. They need everything. They need every prospect they could possibly have. Like Michael Misa is a good fit, but Schaefer they don't have a young good defenseman coming up. I will say that. As good as like obviously the whole story about next year, McKenna being this star prospect is incredible, and I can't wait to watch him in college next year. But
crazy too.
I will say that if you need a defenseman next year, 6'4" Keaton Verhoff is going to be a star in the NHL. This guy
interesting.
He only started playing goalie, I believe, defense when he was 12 years old. He was a goalie before that. Like you hear about forwards
really?
Defense. This is a guy who was playing goalie.
That's crazy. Good skater then.
He goes to D, and he's maybe the second best prospect next year. And
overshadowed though, right? Like no one hears about him.
Yeah, the under 18s. Well, see, he played in for West in Victoria, but he was one of the best players at the under 18s overall, and he missed the first few games because he wasn't part of the team at the time. So Keaton Verhoff is going to turn so many. Like I have him, I think, at number 2 or number 3 for my next draft. If you don't get Schaefer, like there's an argument that there might be more intrigue in Keaton Verhoff, because of the size and skill factor. Like he had like something like 50 points this year as a 6'4" defense.
And then my last question for you, Steven, before we let you go, is just the general thoughts on the OHL draft this year. Like in your opinion, with all the top OHL talent available, the Schaefers, the Misas, the Martones, I know you're very high on guys like Brady Martin, Jake O'Brien, and Kayshawn Aitchison.
My favorite player to watch.
Like your favorite player that you've mentioned a lot throughout the season. Like where does this OHL draft rank in your mind as far as what we've seen? Like we look back to possibly the McDavid and Marner draft and how deep that was for the OHL with some top end guys, but to possibly have 5 guys from the OHL go in the top 10, how much do you think that what you've seen from the OHL this year, and things might change with all the NCAA agreement going forward, but how proud are you of the league this year for having a lot of top end talent that you've been able to cover.
Well, it makes it easier for someone based in Ontario to go see these players. And when you look at it, there's a realistic chance that the top 3 players could all come from the same league. Like, that's incredible. You look back when Michigan, I think it was 21, where they had all their like really high end prospects like Kent Johnson, Owen Power, Matty Beniers all playing on the same team. Like, that was really cool. With this all being in the same league, like, that's still like such a testament of how good the league is. Because there's been a lot of talk, like, is the league getting watered down a little bit? When you look at the skill, the high end skill is still there, and part of it is you look at the development levels, the GTHL, the LMHAs, all that stuff. Like, there's so much high end talent coming up, and so it's not a surprise to see all these high end guys at the top of this draft board. So yeah, like, it's exciting. Like, Schaefer is a future top pairing defenseman. Like, Michael Misa is the guy that if I need to go out and get a goal, like, that's who I want in the draft. And yeah, you look at Porter Martone. People are way too underrating him, man. Like, they're like, oh, his skating's not great. His skating isn't bad, and that's something you give an NHL coach 5 minutes to figure out for him, and he's going to be a great player. Like you want a Porter Martone on your team. And then I love Brady Martin, because Sean Aitchison, man, like, that's everything you want in a defenseman. A guy who wants to be as difficult as humanly possible to play against. Like, that's the thing. Like, Schaefer's great. He's got the high end playmaking. Obviously, we know he's going to probably be the first overall pick. But Sean Aitchison is like exactly what you want. Just he wants to knock guys down. He can score. He can fight. He's fearless. He's not big, but he's fearless. And when you've got a guy like that who's not afraid of anything out there, he's going to be a good player. So a ton of talent. OHL is going to probably have the best draft of anyone this year, and it's interesting because Western Canada kind of had a couple great years. It's Ontario's turn.